everybody. Welcome to the CSM panel. I'm here with CSM 9 members. Some of them are already CSM 10 members, so please welcome them. And this is going to be a Q&A session. They probably have some interesting things to tell you. But apart from that, feel free to shoot questions. Yeah. Introduce yourself.
My name is Sion. I am from Goonswarm Federation.
My name is Corebloodbrothers, and I'm Ratuhim. I'm from Providence.
Yeah.
My name is Aras. I'm from Noir.
My name is Asayanami Dei. I'm from Adocracy, from W Space.
My name is Gorski Car. I'm from Verge of Collapse.
My name's Steve Ronuken. I'm from the Alliance Vote Steve Ronuken for CSM.
My name is Xander Phoena. I'm from Pandemic Legion.
My name is Mangala Solaris. I'm in RVB Red Federation.
I'm Corbexx, and I'm from No Holes Barred.
All right, so I guess it's open for you guys to ask questions if you have whatever.
So the question was, should there be a way to recall a CSM that isn't performing as expected? And it's mostly to the new players, or not new players, sorry, newer members of the CSM, so Corbexx. Or not Corbexx. Corbexx over there, and Corebloodbrothers right here. Confusion is a...
On my personal views,
yeah.
I think it has to come from potentially CCP, but then, yeah, we should be able to recall people that just aren't pulling their weight. I think it needs to be initiated by CCP, and then we need to have a say in it as well, but I do think potentially like that needs to happen.
This question is for Corbexx. Now that your alliance, No Holds Barred, has moved out of its wormhole, do you have any plans for the future?
Do I have any planned?
Yes, do you have any plans for the future?
I'm not sure.
You cannot. This is for Corbexx.
Sion, do you have any positions open for a Diplo for Goons?
Well, you know, I think I do.
So Corbexx, what you're saying is you're joining Goonswarm Federation?
I think I might be going there as a Diplo, yes.
Oh, really? Well, it's glad to have you as the CFC's 4th CSM for this term. I welcome you with open arms.
I believe that could be correct.
Hold on. We have to seal this with that.
Yeah.
It's happening.
So, yeah, now we have 4 CFC members on the council for this coming council. And Corbexx is a really great friend, and he's been a fantastic GIA agent for this entire time. I might be making that up, I might not be. You don't know. But he will be in Goonswarm, and we are going to have an excellent year with our candidates. So, we definitely did not bribe him.
Yeah, wormhole people do not freak the fuck out. Like, I will still be doing everything for the wormhole people. Like.
So, yeah, good to have you on board.
Thank you very much.
A bit of a political question. If I could each ask of you in turn, if you could just say what's the one best thing from the panel, and also what's the one worst thing from being a CSM member. So if you can say one good thing and one bad thing over the last year, what would it be?
The best thing about being on the CSM is tending to know about stuff before it happens and being able to give feedback on it. The worst thing, you come to Fanfest and find out absolutely nothing because you found out everything in advance. Yay, keynote, and it's all stuff I know. A little deflated.
Best thing, probably just thinking back on things that happened this past year, probably the Somer Blink incident. It was a pretty awful time in the community, but it was in terms of things that the CSM was able to effectively work on, it was pretty high up there in terms of awesome, and a lot of that credit goes to CCP's Leeloo and Falcon, who worked with us very closely on that. Worst thing, probably when something sucks, you know it sucks, everyone in the community knows it sucks, and they ask you, CSM, can you fix this? And you're just like, I have tried. I am trying. I can't try any harder. That's hard.
Really the best thing is to be able to take an institution like the CSM and inject a healthy dose of irreverence into it so that you can actually enjoy it and not take it too seriously. And it kind of levels out the worst parts, because if worst is pretty subjective, and if you always are looking for a way to have fun, then it's never really too bad. And this is something that I think is important, certainly as a goon, that I remember, is that we treat everything just with a little bit of a lighthearted bent, and a little bit of, just that healthy dose of irreverence to keep things fun. And remember, we are playing a game. It is certainly space politics, and it is certainly serious business and affects a lot of people, but that doesn't mean you can't have fun.
Probably the best thing for me is that you can actually get some stuff done and stuff can get changed. From my point of view, the worst thing is you don't get to play the game as much, which is a bit of a issue.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that on suddenly having no time to do the things that you do in game. You go from, in my situation, go from being a reasonably well-known FC, quite visible member of the community, to almost a recluse. And it can be a bit of a downer. Luckily, I'm free of that in about a week, so look out for me in space, guys. I'm coming home.
Yeah, I think the best thing is definitely being able to enact actual change, like real, actual things you can influence, and you then get to see that, and that's a really enjoyable experience. And the worst thing, I'd reiterate what Mangala says, you have less free time to actually play Eve, and that's quite difficult, I guess.
And now you see why we need irreverence.
Do you think you were an effective CSM? And was the one thing that you pushed for as a group that you didn't achieve, that you regret?
Well, I think I was kind of effective on some things, but I tried to push for certain ships to get buffed, but it didn't work out that well, I guess, like battle cruisers, but we'll see in the future.
With the new release cadence, we get to work on a lot more than the previous CSMs have with the expansions, because, you know, devs are constantly working on something new, and it's getting released in like every 5 weeks. So every 5 weeks we get new things on our plate that we can put our feedback forward for, you know. And yeah, so that basically means that we accomplished a lot this term. But yeah, there's always more to be done. It's never a finished work.
I think one thing the CSM was sort of both effective and divided on was the whole intra-corp aggression thing, friendly fire. I think that was the case where I was, you know, some CSM members were for the removal of friendly fire, some CSM members were against it. I was one of the ones who was against it. And while ultimately it did end up getting removed, I think that conversation and the fact that we were able to have that discussion did a lot. So that kind of on a slightly tangential area, but I think it's one where the CSM process, even if it included some disagreement in the CSM, had a big effect and had a positive effect on the game.
So do you guys think with the direction that CCP's taken with their rollout plans and the path that they've taken with the game, would you guys say that there's a well-rounded representation on the CSM with respect to the changes that CCP comes up with or talks to you guys about? Or do you think there are areas of gameplay that could use more representation, or do you guys think you had the expertise in those areas when those things came up to speak to those changes or recommendations?
The CSM is not like 14 members. Every member here represents thousands of players behind him. So if you look behind you, there will always be people who know stuff way better than you do. And so you can still channel that info through you.
Yeah, this is kind of one of the misconceptions about the CSM, is that it's some sort of a focus group and we're the specialists. And the reality is that we're not. We represent people who put us into space office. And we rely heavily on people who know lots more about this than we do. And you get a lot of leverage out of that knowledge. of having to be able to just crowdsource solutions. Be like, hey, you're the expert on whatever. Why don't you tell me what the deal is here and I'll take it to CCP. So the representation on the CSM in terms of member diversity is less important than the CSM's ability to liaise with the community.
Yeah. And ultimately with STV, you know, the CSM is pretty perfectly representative of the people who voted. So at the end of the day, if your particular field you feel isn't covered on CSM, well then your guys didn't turn up to vote.
We saw that with 8 to 9 with LoSec. CSM 8 didn't have anyone who was super connected with the LoSec community. CSM 9 has. And that was a big and positive change for CSM CCP.
Yeah, Sugar got out of this by going to a LoSec session.
Next.
What kind of influence do you think that the new release cadence has had on the effectiveness of the CSM, for better or for worse? And following on for that, if you could give one piece of advice to the incoming members of CSM 10, the freshmen, what would it be?
It's had a positive and negative effect, because back with the older release cadence, there was longer time between something being proposed and something being released, whereas now it's a lot faster. There are benefits to that because feedback can be rolled into it faster, but there's the downside that there is a lot shorter time periods for stuff to come out, which we've got to deal with stuff faster.
Less time to react.
Yeah. I would say in general it's been positive, but then again I wasn't really here when we were doing the slow release cadence, so.
One of the positive things is it makes it less scary if the CSM doesn't like something, because if it's something that's going to need a whole bunch more work because of a CSM conversation, it's no longer, well, we can't, you know, we've had this forum discussion and we have to close it now because we are shipping this in the summer release. Let's go. It can be released when it's done, and CSM is a part of when it's done.
The reality is, I don't think people quite understand how fast this is. And so you have the dev time that goes into it and then the release time. And we don't usually, we're not included in the development process. That's not really our role. But in terms of feedback, there's only so much time that we have feedback for. And when it was 2 yearly releases, that's plenty of time. But the entire company is adjusting to this new 6-week cadence. And the CSM didn't. Like, the CSM was still wired around the 2 yearly release schedule. And there was a period of time in the winter, if you read the dev blog that went out, you got to see some of the frustrations there, overtly or some sort of subtext in some places. The problems there were sort of on both sides of the fence. We didn't realize what we were missing until it was really obvious. I'm like, well, hey, why aren't we asking for this? What is our role in this? How do we fit into this new cadence? And the other part was talking to CCP and be like, hey, can you make space in your schedule for us, because we'd really like to talk to you about this stuff. And to their great credit, CCP did do that, and we are now implementing a lot of new structures that are going to make it a lot easier for us to communicate. Whether we are able to use that effectively is now more on us than it is on CCP. So the only piece of advice I would give to new CSM members would be to communicate.
Communicate, ask questions, ask more questions.
I know you're NDA'd for very valid reasons, but how many times this year did you think, holy shit, I wish every EVE gamer could see this, especially concerning mid or long-term perspective?
Yeah, there are of course moments, but why would you ruin something you have? On a serious note, when you are going to the Winter Summit, for example, you get to meet CCP. When you're having more distance from CCP, it's easy to troll them and to say that shit and that shit and that shit. But when you meet people up face and you realize that the work they put in and their mortgages, and you get to meet their kids and everything, that kind of puts it in perspective that you're a volunteer playing a game, and that for them this is their income, this is their livelihood. And if you then look back at breaking an NDA over something silly to make somebody happy, then that falls in perspective, and I don't think it's that much of an issue anymore.
I'm not asking for breaking the
Of course, if you like Steve said, the stuff that you guys saw in the keynote, we got to see 2 months ago. The art book, the drawings are fucking insane, and we got to see them, and we begged like, can we get a copy as old CSMers? Thank you, and it's like no. So sometimes, but
still trying to buy it.
When you look back at it, the NDA is a big thing, and you might rather discuss what falls under it and what doesn't. I think that's a more interesting topic than the NDA itself, because it is useful.
It's hard to deal with when again, in that situation where players are frustrated about something, especially when you know information about it, and you know conversations that are going on. It can be hard to deal with that NDA stuff, and there's just countless times. I made a little GIF of like SpongeBob making a rainbow that says NDA, because of all the times I've just had to say, I can't talk about that. Or can we change the subject or something like that. But it's one of the things, I guess one of the things that I'd give to incoming CSM members is figure out how you talk around the NDA. Because as I've been on the CSM longer, it becomes easier to have conversations with players without leaking.
So you know when the devs talk about things and like, well, we've got this really cool thing, we can't tell you about it, and you're like, oh, I want to know more. And that great sense of pleasure that gives the dev who's trolling you about it, I get that exact same sense. So you just be like, hey, well, I'd really like to know what's coming, or something that makes me excited that you're excited about. That's great, because you just want to know more, and I get to see you be frustrated, and that's pretty awesome.
You're a goon, right?
And it can be really difficult because obviously you have access to a lot of information, and trying to keep on, CCP uses a lot of different vectors to make information public, and trying to keep up with all those vectors is more or less impossible for one person. And trying to keep tabs on what's public and what's not public at any one time is
often enough you go back to the devs
difficult.
and ask, was this mentioned anywhere publicly? Can I talk about this? But to answer the original question, we go, wow, when can you ship this? Every other month, like at least every other month. Most recently, when they showed us the new structure rebalance thing, the whole dev block, wow. So, very often.
Next one. Come on, guys.
If there's, oh, cool. There
should be tons of questions.
I think it's maybe fair to say EVE Online's facing more challenges now in space games, with Elite Dangerous and Star Citizen on the horizon. Do you think, the cadence and the changes that are being made, we've seen some great announcements at Fanfest already, that EVE is in a good shape for the next 5 to 10 years? Obviously, it's got stiff competition, so just your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not mutually exclusive, right? Like a person who's playing a space game will play more space games. And EVE offers an experience that you can't get anywhere else. And it's the reason why we're up here. It's not because we're like, hey, we get to fly around and shoot people in our kill-death ratio of, MOBAs or whatever. That doesn't matter. You get to deal with people. You get to deal with not their in-game lives, not just their in-game lives, but their real lives. You meet people in real life. You have a lot of fun. You make a lot of friends. And it's that sense of community that makes the CSM worthwhile, and it makes EVE special. So whatever challenges that might come up in terms of space games or whatever else, until somebody makes a really compelling sandbox within a really nice community and developers who are willing to put up with us.
And you guys.
Yeah, I don't think that's, the health of the game is not something that I would be worried about.
If you see that this is the second largest coming for FanFest ever, if you see venues like EVE Amsterdam going 100, 200, going to even more hopefully next year, and you can see EVE is healthy, you can see the voting going up, you can just look around you, and you can see this is special. A lot of us have talked with journalists, and there are people here, researchers from universities and stuff, and they can't wrap their heads around what's going on here. And my kids understand it, and their teacher doesn't. So this is pretty unique. And if you get competition, competition is good because it pushes you further. So yeah, let's see if CCP can handle that challenge.
I do think the new release cadence and all that is an improvement and has made the game more healthy. just the sheer volume and awesomeness of stuff we've seen over the past year, and the feeling in the player base this FanFest compared to last seems, at least to me, markedly improved.
I mean, you've seen CCP Siegel talk about it during the keynote yesterday about how much more energized she believes the developers are in this new release cycle. You know, we seem to be getting so much more content now, and not only that, the developers seem more happy. You know, everybody seems happier. You know, so it's a win-win, I think, all the way around.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Kind of make a reference back to what Corebloodbrothers said before is like, this is kind of one of the largest challenges in addressing that, is when you have a situation where you do know the developers and you get to meet them in real life and you see their families and you realize it's their job, it becomes much more difficult to make these kind of critical assessments. So when you're saying, hey, look, there's these new space games coming, there's all this other stuff, how do you, as somebody who sees the whole process, you see the player side and you see the developer side, how do you bridge that gap? You maintain your utility by being somewhat critically objective and not just constant positive streams of reinforcement, because that's not really helpful. If you want to, for the best thing for both the game and for the company, really is that we provide our utility to step back from being cheerleaders or anything else and look at the kind of question that is, like, how will this affect Eve? What is Eve's future realistically? How can we make it better? And it's a significant challenge to kind of bring that critical thinking, not just critical in terms of analytical, but critical in terms of being sometimes negative.
As representatives of your constituencies, do you ever believe that you run into, or do you believe that other CSM members run into conflicts between what's good for their group versus what's good for the game? And if someone could, besides Sion, could answer.
I can actually. It's actually we agree. Sion and I. It's pretty unlikely he is a goon and he is a weird niche provenance dude. And there's some with the new soft mechanics. Everybody agrees that places like Decline and also Providence are in a good state here, because the way we utilize our space, I think there's no doubt we are good with this new mechanism. But on the same side, I think Sion and I are the most critical about some defects may be possible in the new soft mechanism. Why? Not because it helps us short term, but in the long term, we have some fears about the health and the state of nullsec. So, and there's not a second doubt. The second they presented it to us, we were both on the same line, not looking at our own alliance, because in this case, the worst thing that can happen to Goonswarm is if they win nullsec. And basically they can like give up and go play somewhere else. That's the worst case scenario. So looking from a CSM point of view, you quickly notice you look at the bigger picture. And that, yeah, that gets you in trouble with your constituents, but yeah, fuck that. So. You're in, so.
I think the...
Kidding, I'm kidding. Go on.
The other thing is, so from a wormhole point of view with the soft changes, like for me, it's fantastic. There's going to be so much abuse of nullsec, and I'm like, yeah, this is great. And obviously, some of the other people are like, this is not quite so good. But you can relay that stuff to them and say, well, this is great for me because I'm going to abuse the hell out of it by doing this, 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 and this. And then they can look at it and say, yeah, you know what, that could be an issue. So it's like, although we don't agree on stuff because I think it's fantastic, they can see where there's a common issue where we're both like, they want it this way because of this, and we want it this way because of this, and then they can get a balance.
So I know you said accept me, but...
I also think it's a little bit dangerous to presume that because Corbexx represents wormholes or Core represents Provi, that everybody you represent has the same opinion, and certainly anybody that knows anything about Pandemic Legion, it sometimes feels like herding cats, you know what I mean, and you will not get a unified opinion on a particular issue, and you just need to try and listen to the critical feedback, and sometimes you have to just talk to the other CSM members and say, look, one person's saying this, one person's saying this, what do you think? And you won't necessarily get a unified opinion from wormholes or from RVB or, you know, it's dangerous to work in that presumption as well, I think.
Like, we argue. Like,
yeah.
Like, we argue all the time. And
Except
it's
Steve.
Yeah.
Steve never argues. An innate ability to avoid drama.
I argue.
He is just the ghost when it comes to drama.
But if you think we all like maybe not get along, but if you all think we all agree and we're all like, everyone's doing this, it's like not the case. It's like we do argue a lot about various bits and pieces, but at the end of the day, we're all here to represent different points of view and give different points of view, and if we all give the same point of view, that's not going to help CCP. So it's better that we do have different points of view, and yeah, arguments do lead to discussion, and that's always good.
Yeah, we also, the discussions do happen in public, where CCP can see them, because that's actually valuable to see. You can see both sides of the story and go, yeah, but that one's a little more important. So at one point we were thinking we'll talk behind the scenes and keep things nice and smooth, but that just doesn't work. It means that CCP doesn't get some of the value it could get. So we're not doing that.
In terms of things that are good for one's constituency and bad for the game, or vice versa, I think as a CSM member, you do run into that. You do have to prioritize the game. You do have to listen to the people who elected you, because it's always possible that they're seeing something that you're missing. Like Sion was saying, you know, we're all backed up by a ton of people, and being able to listen to that is important. But sometimes you do have to say sorry, and maybe they'll vote for you again, maybe they won't. But I think it would make you a poor CSM to provide bad feedback to CCP just in order to get back on, because statistically, I think you'll do a little better even at the next election, being able to say, I did this feedback, it had this positive effect.
What's funny is there's another component to that that's unasked in that question, and that is when you're elected as a representative of a constituency, how does CCP see your advocacy of an issue? And that's been a really interesting challenge this year for, I think, most of us, is that sometimes our motives are called into question because they have those same kind of questions, all right? If you're a developer, you're like, well, maybe these guys are trying to metagame me into a development decision. And these are serious things that have happened this year where people will say, you know, I don't necessarily trust you guys. And they'll tell, I think this is sort of freely with players in general, is they don't necessarily assume that you have the best interest of the game at heart. And even if you say that you have the best interest of the game at heart, I mean, come on, we're EVE players, right? So it's a really interesting hurdle to clear, to try and say, look, I really think this is bad for the game. I'm not saying it because it's bad for me or us or whatever. I just don't necessarily agree with it because of this, or vice versa, good because whatever. It's so that's the kind of thing that you guys don't get to see that we have to deal with. And as it's natural just that we are representative people, but it can be really frustrating.
It's also impossible to please everybody.
Yep.
I woke up this morning to 120 EVE mails, and some of them are people saying, you're responsible for Teak, remove it. Like, yeah, sometimes the players also baffle you, so yeah.
I guess what science says can segue into the next question, which is, are you happy with your access to the developers? Are you happy with that level of communication? Or are you running into roadblocks where it is perceptions, or they don't want to listen, or they just don't value your input?
Really quickly, I think the access is there, the agency isn't.
So I've probably got a bit of a different point of view.
Can you clarify what you mean by that?
All right, so there's this kind of misconception of what I think in general what the CSM is, that we have hands-on development access, and we don't. We don't have the ability to say, hey, we don't like jump fatigue, we're going to change it, because we're not in their workflow. They show it to us, and they're like, hey, what do you think of this? And we're like, well, whatever, we think about it. And the agency of the CSM does not come from that access, right? It doesn't come from that. The power of the CSM is in the people. It's in you guys, the people who vote for the CSM, to back them up and be, hey, we trust these people to represent us. We want them to do a good job. If you're not listening to them, we're upset, which is one of the reasons that voter apathy is kind of a problem. But anyway, So, but it's not the access that's there. It's when you have a situation where the developers can look you in the eye and be like, yeah, I will nod politely and listen, and then do exactly what they're going to do anyway, because they don't really care about your feedback. If that happens, there's a problem. And as long as there is some method that we have to communicate with them and execute that agency that we have, that we know that they're listening not only to us, but to you guys, that's the important part. It's not the hands-on, we're going to do the development stuff. It is the, hey, this is a legitimate concern. You guys should really look at this because it could have serious implications for the game health. So it's an oblique kind of agency that's really tough to quantify and qualify.
I actually had a similar thing to that about a month ago where, and I think this is the difference between being reactive and proactive. Like, you can just look at the forums and Confluence and just make comments, but you can do a lot more when the players actually come to you and say, right, we've got this issue. And then you can look at it, have a look at it, and see what it is, then do a bit of research. And for a particular case where there was, I spoke to Fossey about it, and I said, look, can we sort out a 10-minute Skype call? And within 2 days, I had a Skype call with him and said, look, this is the issues. This is what's coming to me. It does seem to be a fairly legitimate concern. Can you look into it? Can you get some figures? And literally there and then, he was onto Eve Metrics, and he was getting numbers and looking at it. And then it's something that I need to look more into. But I mean, the access is there where we can get like monumental stuff. And a lot of developers are more than happy to sort of put 10, 15 minutes aside and listen to various issues and stuff and find out stuff for us, because it's very hard from the point of view of you guys don't see everything and we don't see everything, and then when you actually get numbers from CCP, it's like, that might not be an issue, or that could be an issue. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff there where like we can get it, and CCP are prepared to talk to us about it.
Seems like there's a pretty good
wait for the mic
between yourselves and CCP in general, and then a pretty good channel for players in general to put things on forums and suggestions and things like that. Is there a good method for players in general that may not be part of any factions or anybody that you represent as a constituent to bring up ideas directly to the CSM as like a board and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? Do you guys think this is something that's worth presenting, or can you guys present this on the player community's behalf?
There are several ways on the forums. There are sections for that. The beautiful lady behind you has made a page somewhere. I can't make it out of my head how to contact the CSM. In-game, I think you can mail us. At least if I look at my in-game mailbox, people are absolutely finding it. Then a lot of us run our own sites, Facebook sites, Twitter. We go to the events. You can find us on comms, open channels, Skype. So there's tons of ways. You have to remember you're talking about ideas. And I always tell people when they bring me ideas about something, think the idea is great, but that first step back. Do you actually think that CCP thinks that this is broken or this can be improved? Because if I'm going to ask this audience, stick your hand in the air if you have an awesome idea, you're going to get 500,000 ideas. And with that, I hope doesn't come disappointment, but what are you going to fix, what you want to achieve, and for how many players will it affect their life and happiness in EVE? And in those things, I think the CSM is more effective than being an idea machine. Because, yeah.
We fairly frequently get emails to like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of us, and the person clearly isn't sure exactly who should perhaps be looking at this. And what tends to happen is the person, most likely or most knowledgeable on that subject will take it and run with it, or we'll just all delete it sometimes.
My advice for avoiding the everyone deletes it, ignores it, or whatever is to make it as much as possible like short and clear. It's a lot easier to read a paragraph about, hey, I'm having some issues with level 4 missions, and I run these, they're not working, the ship balance is off, whatever. Can you guys help me? Than it is to read a 3-page Word document about your complete redesign for level 4 missions. The one paragraph issue is much more likely to get a response back, you know, oh, what are you seeing? How did this used to work? Did this used to work? Than the big long thing where it's just like, that's great, features and ideas form.
Yep. If you do have a big idea, post it in the forums, link it to us with the TLDR. That way, if we go, yep, that's a reasonable idea.
We can link it to CCP.
We can, direct link, not
we do all the time.
Yeah, and you guys don't have to wait for us either. The devs are really open to feedback from anyone, so just be like, hey, I have this really cool idea, and I want to tell you. Like, there's nothing stopping you from talking to developers yourselves. Is it?
In the back.
Hi. Having a lot of avenues to reach you guys for ideas is wonderful. I'm wondering if there is a need for a tool, kind of like eVemocracy or eVote or something, like a website or something that kind of like Eve updates, the new website for just telling people about updates. But is there a need to maybe have higher level voting or some things that you bring up to CCP from all the ideas, and almost like how a bill gets, you know, read into law or something, but then something that all EVE players can then choose to vote or not on?
Yeah, what you have to remember here, I think, is that the CSM is not the body that is going to say to a developer. We're not like raising hands and saying, okay, got 75%, so this is going to go in the next release. It's not our job. And what you have seen recently is CCP Fuzzy making, what do you call the English word? Help me here. A survey about the time frame windows for the new soft mechanics. And I don't know if who filled it in? Can you stick hand in the air? Yeah. Okay. So if you multiply that times how many thousand EVE players, he might have gotten thousands of reactions on that. And it might be interesting to look at how many reactions he got and how he's going to use that. And I think that's a good question for the CSM to ask. So you did this experiment. How do you like the mechanism in itself? And can we use it more in the future? And I think that comes close to your question, if I'm correct. So it's a good idea maybe to ask Fuzzy how that
Steve has a website set up, by the way, for little things.
Yep. I mean, it's not been particularly publicized. It's been mentioned a few times, but I probably should have put it out there more, and will next term.
So I personally don't like this because, like, if I do a wormhole little things thread, now I'll get all the little things together, and I'll just go to CCP with them and say, look, how hard are any? Can you have a look at these? Are these easy, hard, or whatever? And they'll go, oh, some of these we can just like do now. Others, oh, we can do that in a couple of days, whatever. But if I actually go and put them all up on a place and then say, right, I want you guys to vote on them, and then you all vote on them, and then the ranks come back, and like this thing's number 1, and then there's number 2, and there's number 3, and then when I take that list to CCP and say, hey, can you look at these? And they're going to go, oh, number 1, 2, and 3 are really hard, but you know, number 4, that's really easy. I can get that done in like 2 minutes. And then you get people moaning, oh, how come you've done number 4 and yet you've not done 1, 2, and 3? Because like more of us voted for that. That needs to be done. Like in some cases, it's just not practical. It's easier just to get a lot of these ideas, sort them out, and then say, look, are any of these like feasible that we can get done fast? Because as soon as you get people voting, and then they get upset when like their number 1 thing isn't sorted, it's one of these issues where you just create problems.
There's another downside to voting. EVE players are known for exploiting a lot of stuff. The guy sitting next to me, if we have a questionnaire, and he can rally 20,000 votes.
I would never do that.
No. So
one word of advice.
We're going to push things to the extreme, and that's with voting also a thing you have to look into, of course.
If you have an idea, run it by somebody first. Anybody. Do not send it to a dev or put it on features and ideas or bring it to CSM until you've spoken to your friend in your corp or you've spoken to somebody you think might have some clue in the situation, because there could be something really obvious you're missing. And it just, the more junk we get in, the harder it is to filter out the good stuff. So just take the time to speak to somebody else about it first before you start sending it out to CSMs and devs and forums and things like that.
Is it answered?
excuse me, is there any type of balancing or inner workings that's done for the voting and selection of CSM? My question being, because most of you are affiliated with larger groups within the game, so the smaller people would tend to think the questions that would be asked mainly come from those larger groups rather than the smaller people. This upcoming one doesn't have a solo PvP representative anymore, and someone that the smaller people would tend to flock towards more to ask their questions because they get responses much more quickly. When you're already hosting a 1,000-man alliance with 3,000 questions versus smaller people who may have 1 or 2 questions and can get to that guy, but he didn't have enough votes because of the overwhelming numbers in the affiliated alliances of the larger CSMs.
So this is one thing where it makes a lot of sense to try to reach out to a number. If you don't know who the right person to talk to is because you didn't have a candidate that you worked with or who isn't in your group or whatever, this is where it makes sense to reach out to a lot of CSMs because you'll be able to find someone who's interested and build a relationship with that person. In terms of the voting, it's the single transferable vote algorithm is published online, and that's how the CSMs are selected. It represents accurately the people who voted. And so one of the things to do is if you want that area to be represented, get people to vote. You talk to your friends, get them to talk to their friends, get them to go and vote. And if there isn't a CSM candidate that they want to vote for, then have them put up their own.
Woo! Wow.
So here's the thing, though. All right, so look at it this way. Like, if everyone on the CSM, we're all public figures, whether we like it or not, right? You don't have to play fair. You can't be like, oh, well, I'm a little guy, what am I going to do? If you mail CSM people and they blow you off or they don't respond or like, yeah, whatever, I'm not going to do it, take it to one of the media sites. Have some fun, man. Like, you don't have to, because
It's not NDA.
Yeah, we're reliant on being voted in. It's not like we're just shown the door just on like the red carpet. We have to do our jobs, and it is on you guys to make sure that we are doing our jobs. And one way to do that is to, make a few waves.
Yeah. With the accounts thing, it ends up being noise in the total number of votes that you need to get elected to the CSM. And you'll see this when the ballot data gets published. Internally, yeah, like Sion was just saying, it's get your idea to the CSM. If the CSM is blowing you off, get your idea to any one of the media sites. And in particular, if that CSM was quite rude, you'll have a wonderful story on your hands, and you will have the distinct pleasure of getting to stir a hornet's nest. Well, you know what? There are trade-offs.
You've got 18 alts, what do you care?
That would also require the CSM to log in. I wish I'd spent more time on CSM this year. I was a lot more active last year. This year I had real life stuff going on, and it took up a lot more time than I wanted it to.
I wish I was like a bit more public, I think, with what I do and what I don't do.
I wish I was more public so Sugar stopped complaining at me.
I wish I was sort of less pessimistic about some of the things that were coming out and more optimistic. I think I've been pretty bad about some of the changes that haven't been as bad as I thought, and I think it's better to be optimistic and like really negative. I know, and it's going to get better tomorrow.
I regret nothing.
right, I think that's about it.
Sorry, before Leeloo wraps up, I also like to point something out to you guys. This CSM is a CSM that for next year made the decision that CSM members are not going to come to Fanfest anymore, but we're going to spread, give the opportunity to more CSM members to come to summits and actually be productive. And it's a big change where we're taking away our own goodies. And I also like to take this moment, Leeloo standing here is behind a lot of the innovations we have achieved for the CSM. The Confluence, the new white paper, also the summit changes and the Fanfest. She made her proposals to us where we got to like choose which we preferred. So the amount of time CCP is putting into us, you even invited us to your home for an awesome night of drinking and weird card games with Paul.
It's called team building.
It's called team building. So before we end up, I also like to have a hand of applause for that, the way you handled us this year, because we're not the easiest persons.
You should clap to these guys. They did a lot of work. And I'd like to point out that we have 9 out of 10 members available, and that's because Sugar Kyle, she is actually representing LowSec at the LowSec session at the moment, so she couldn't make it.
That's dedication.
Yeah.
Fucking, I mean.
She ran away.
All right. Thank you guys for coming.
Chat us up.